welcome everybody to today's webinar. We've got an exciting webinar for you today, an executive briefing on contact center home working, which I think is going to be is certainly a topic of the moment, and it's going to be very interesting. Agenda, I'll be taking you through some top tips for home working. We will be then followed up by Gillian Bell. Gillian is a consultant with at-home customer contacts. She's got a background in home working, so I think has got some very interesting things to say around the subject. We're also joined by Mike Murphy. Mike is Regional Practice Manager for Interactive Intelligence, and Mike will be talking through some of the technology and technology implications of making home working together. You can ask questions and answers at any time. We will hold those back till the interactive question and answer session from the audience. And just a reminder, if you want to follow us on Twitter, it is the hashtag #HWWebinar, and you're more than welcome to tweet into that and chat while we're going through. Before we get going, I want to share a poll with you, and that is: do you currently have home working in the contact center? So the answers to that are yes, no, don't know, or if you don't have a contact center, please click on the not applicable. So if you'd like to put your details in there, would be good. I think we've got the majority of people voted. We're still waiting for about three more people to vote. So I'm just going to close off the results, and I'll share those with everyone now. So it looks like 58% of you don't have contact center home working. So I think we've got some very, very good information for you. And 28% of you do have home working. Gillian, does that tie in with your sort of perception of a typical contact center audience?
Yeah, definitely. Jonty, yeah, that's actually reflective of the results that I've certainly seen to date.
Yeah, so wonderful. So, so hopefully the people who've done it already today, you will learn some. We'd also be quite interested in sharing some of your experience. So when we get to that section, if you could start to share some experience. And just to remind you, can ask questions at any time. So before I close that down, and I will take you through some top tips for home working to help set the scene. My first tip is really that home working suits some people better than others. It suits people who've got a structured home life, who are quite mature in attitude. But there are also some groups of people that it doesn't suit so much, and I know Gillian's going to be talking through this in more detail. And that could be, for instance, younger people like a student living at home. And this is a picture, I'd like to say it was my son's bedroom, but I think it's a bit clean for that. One of the problems is not necessarily just the maturity of the students. Actually, the parents can often, perceive home working for youngsters as not necessarily being seen as a proper job, and have some difficulty in segmenting that bedroom during the course of a work shift into being a work environment. So that's certainly one challenge. But Gillian will be looking at the profile of home workers and what works better in more depth there. Building home workers into the company culture is certainly an interesting area to look at. Because it is possible that isolation can creep in. There are a range of things that you can do to that, things such as regular days in the office, and particularly things from the supervisor side, such as weekly team calls, scheduled training webinars could be quite a good way of delivering training, and certainly things such as daily calls into the team supervisor. So I think building the company culture is quite an important piece, and certainly something that lots of companies have managed to do. One of the other challenges in a real call center is does anyone know about this type of scenario? That happens a lot. And in a regular call center, you can put up your hand, or you can track down your supervisor, who's quite often the sort of first level help desk, as I describe it in many contact centers. But there are some technological solutions to that. So things such as instant messaging, enabling agents to chat with each other. So does anyone know when the 2-for-1 offer ends? Just put into a little internet box, and then other people in the team can respond to that. So that's quite a powerful thing, and I think Mike will be touching on that very briefly later in his session. But one of the areas where I think, when I talk with a lot of people, that has been quite challenging is just how to manage those, what I call around the coffee machine moments, which is the sort of the, if you like, the social chit chat, catching up on all of the gossip. And I'm not sure I've fully got an answer to that one. So if anyone's got any suggestions on that, if they'd like to enter that into the question box, and we can hopefully share those with the audience later on in the webinar. So that's my session overall. Before we go on to the next part, what I want to do is just share with you a new poll, and that poll is, what are the biggest barriers to home working in your organization? So is it senior management buy-in? Is it managing staff remotely? Is it security? Is it the cost of equipment? Or is it that you just basically have other priorities in the business which are taking a higher issue on that? So if you'd like to vote, what you think is the biggest barrier to you on that? I think this is a multiple answer, so you can put in more than one answer into this. So I think we've got most of the votes in. We're just still waiting for a couple to come through. Coming through thick and fast now. Right, I think we've now got more or less most people in. So I'm just going to close that, and I'm going to share the results with you there. So it looks like probably the biggest two issues there are managing staff remotely and security, which we had a hunch that those might be the other issues. Quite interesting. Other priorities seems to come up there. That you know, there's lots of things you're doing in the business. Mike, do you see that the sort of home working is sort of one of a massive initiatives that people are looking at and trying to investigate which one works best?
Yeah, certainly, Jonty. The home working strategy would more than likely fit into perhaps a wider virtualization strategy. So from that perspective, interesting results, and we'll be curious to see how the opinions may change as we go through the presentations.
Yeah, it'll be quite interesting to see. And what I'd also like to do is, having established what those barriers are, particularly managing staff remote and security, is what do you think would help you to overcome those barriers? So if you've got a little question box on the right-hand side, if you can just type now into that question box what you believe are some of the things that could help you to overcome some of those barriers to home working. So if you could put that into the box, we're starting to get the first ones coming through, and it's quite a tough question. Just waiting for a couple more to come through. Okay, that's great. We'll go through and we'll read out some of those as we go through. There's still time to answer them as we speak through. So we're now going to the next stage on the agenda, and that is Gillian Bell is going to take us through an executive briefing on contact center home working. Gillian is a consultant with at-home customer contacts. So Gillian, if you'd like to take us through your presentation, that would be great.
Yep, thank you, Jonty. I'll just start as we load up the presentation. And executive briefing sounds very formal, but what I'd really like to do is to share some important points, and I think more importantly probably a lot of the critical success factors to home working. As the slide that's up there just now, you can see that I do have a face for radio, as they say, and but my background was actually with Hilton Hotels before I became a consultant with at-home customer contacts. Within Hilton, probably like a lot of companies, we went through an awful lot of strategic change, and in 2007, part of that strategic change involved developing an at-home program. Within Europe, we wanted to do this to enable us to get to a different recruitment market, because we were looking to recruit language speakers, and we wanted to do that very, very cost effectively. and homeworking became the forward strategy for us. We developed it to hit about, I think it actually came to about 150 to 200 people that were with us with Hilton within Europe. And because of the success of this, and really sort of, we worked sort of in tangent with the States, and it led to it going up to about between, I think it now is actually way over 1,000 agents. It's actually about 2,000 within the US. So sort of lots of experience, lots of practical experience of how to actually launch a whole sort of homeworking program. And what certainly do now is do webcasts, but the most important thing is to share the experience, pulled from other companies, benchmarking, case studies, and help people sort of companies move their contacts home in a very streamlined fashion. Such the next slide would be great. I just wanted to share some growth forecasts, and these are actually US statistics. It's a very, I think for what to be also marketing speak here, it's quite an immature model within the UK, but it's really quite a mature model within the US. You can see here that it's an average of over a lot of analysts are predicting that 30% of contact centres today, as in 2011, are utilising homeworking. I'm not saying that they've taken over, you know, the whole of the contact centre, but they're utilising homeworkers in some way, shape and form. And certainly that this, and I think this is a phenomenal statistics, that in 2013 this will actually reach 80%. If we can just move on to the next slide. So there's huge growth within the States, but lots and lots of interest in the UK. And from a company's perspective, these are statistics that I did a survey back in June of 2011, and these are the statistics that we got at that point. As we can see, cost is by far the greatest driver for homeworking, and obviously that's to do with a lot of the very obvious costs. You can reduce, you know, facilities or not have to invest as much in a lot of facilities costs going forward. And the other bigger ones, which are quite pleasing to see come through, are retention, the customer service, and then the business continuity. Retention is a great one. Retention, on average, is actually been improved through using homeworking by between 35 and 50%, which is incredible statistics. That again, you know, staff are happier. If you get the right people, they're working from their own homes, and they want to stay with the organisation. It's allowing them to do that. Customer service, another huge driver, and more importantly, I think the big one coming through is business continuity. And if we just want to move to the next slide, that would be great. I think that certainly would work in days like today. I don't know if anyone can hear any wind in the background. I'm working from home, and it is horrific conditions up here in Scotland, and we had horrific conditions over the winter in the whole of the UK last year. So that is not a picture of my home, but it is an idea that we can actually sort of, you know, keep things going. And I know of quite a few companies that and clients of mine and companies I've dealt with that really dug themselves out of a snow hole, as they say, with using home working. Just move on to the next slide, thanks. So the organisations benefit from home working, but the benefits to employees are, there's a lot of these are pretty obvious, but a lot of these really need to be understood to understand what drives people to want to work from home. And it's actually getting the best people that work from home, but also seeking the best people, so you're getting the best results for the organisation as well. I did some sort of research, and it is, believe it or not, about 12.5 hours that we all spend per week getting ready or commuting to go to work, which is an awful lot of our sort of personal time, and a lot of people with other commitments are really not wanting to do that. The obvious
quite interesting to see what split would be getting ready and what would be commuting to work.
I know. I suppose it depends. I suppose I'm a female. I can say that we may be a little bit sexist here. Yeah, depends how presentable you'd really like to be. But the increase in the fuel costs is just incredible as well, and just the whole commuting time is a great advantage not to have to do it. But I think it's really the last 4 points there, which it's people that are looking for this change in their lifestyle. So it's home working is enabling people to, I suppose it's like reduced child care, sort of time, and by that, obviously, it's home working. So the answer is in the question there. You're actually wanting to work, but if you are actually living near your school, you're not having to go into work. Then you can actually build a lot of the sort of child care into your working day. Certainly adds flexibility into lifestyles. And it's because of these reasons, if we can just jump into the next slide, please, that the demographics that we found, and these are the demographics of what call centres or organisations are finding of the movement between what you're finding in a sort of traditional brick and mortar environment to what you're finding when you're actually getting the home agents. And to me this is really the pivotal, which is always a very difficult word for me to say, so pivotal slide, because from this, if we're understanding that we're actually sort of attracting a sort of more an older age group, so it's people who are more mature, they have a lot more experience, usually management experience, usually higher caliber, and certainly from the Hilton perspective, you're attracting even people who are bilingual that really sort of like this model. So this is actually driving a lot of the processes and procedures and the way that this type of culture within your sort of new home working contact centre really needs to be changed and thought about. So I just want to move on quickly to the next slide, thanks. So what the impacts of these things have to the organisation is that there are characteristics, if we just look down the left-hand side there of the slide, of people who are attracted to the model and what you really want. You're really looking for people who can be independent, who want to be independent, who are independent thinkers, they're problem solvers, and they are mature. So this is actually driving a very different sourcing and recruitment model. So you have to sort of think through all the different processes and procedures on the back of that. And just, speaking from a high-level perspective, it's searching for people in the right places. So it's searching online. It may be in like mums.net or just some of the others, like fishing where the fish are, so to speak. Then and the next level is if you're asking for people to apply online, it's ensuring that they've got the technical skills. So maybe ask them to sort of navigate their way through different different sort of sites. Just really making sure that they have sort of some basic technical skills that they will need when they move into the home environment. And then the third level is obviously, as Jonty mentioned earlier, you really need to have a sort of organised area within the house or a private area. It depends really how, what you want to sort of decide to do from an organisational perspective, making sure that is an area that they can work. And for me, I think the best practice is really it's imperative to make sure that you're getting that right throughout that recruitment process. What we do find, because they're more mature, they're very good with people. They've got much more experience, so there's a heightened customer engagement. So there's less emphasis on that. High aptitude, high caliber. So you can find on average that the training period can actually drop, believe it or not, by about 25%. These are starting to be some of the more hidden savings, so to speak, not just the facilities costs, as we mentioned earlier, that can come in through the home working model. Less social interaction because they're really getting, I suppose, the interaction from other things in their lives, and I can go on to talk about that a little bit more later. But it's actually it's like more reduced sort of one-to-one coaching. It doesn't need to be as structured. Team meetings aren't quite as sharing of all the statistics. It really needs to be tailored to take into account this different type of demographic that you are attracting to the home working model. And if you do attract that type of person, then you really will make the model work. And another big impact is on the scheduling side of things. People who are home workers are looking for that much more flexible lifestyle, looking to be much more flexible, so we really need to re-engineer the workforce management systems to enable that to happen. And when you do that, can I have the new slide, please? We can have the halcyon days of split shifts can actually come into play. Just quickly to go through some of the outcomes. A lot of these, I suppose, a lot of people do accept come in through home working, but it's been proven again. The customer satisfaction improves through just that whole sort of agent profile. The employee satisfaction improves, as I mentioned earlier, if you get that scheduling right. They're based at home. Selling is better, and this has been found again, and certainly a lot of home workers that I have spoken to, is because they feel that they can actually connect. There's not that huge noise going on in the background, and they really feel that they can connect really well on a one-to-one basis with the customers. Occupancy and productivity have seen improvements in this between about 10 to 15%, and very quickly it's because if you can get these short, sharp shifts, that was difficult for me to say, then it really means that you're getting the best, and you're getting that really focused time with the home worker, and again, you don't have as much of that sort of background noise. The attendance, much lessened, I was going to say. So attendance is increased and absence is decreased, that's what I meant to say. And just one thing really to mention is that some companies, when they first have home workers going to home, is the average handle time does increase because they sort of talk more that they're in that environment, but that does in the longer term really sort of stabilize. So it's just something that does stabilize over a few months when they sort of get used to the environment and get used to what they're doing. Could I just move on to the next slide? Thank you. I just wanted to mention a couple of the concerns that actually links in very neatly to the poll that we just did, when the two biggest barriers are security and managing people remotely. So I just want to sort of quickly touch on these two as we move through. And as security, a problem, the big problems used to be the technology, used to be how are we actually going to make the technology work, and thanks to as Mike will mention later, all the cloud technology, these things are just all going away. They're just completely and utterly non-issues now. The best thing to do security-wise is to recreate exactly what is happening in the office. So a lot of it it's asking people to verify there's something they are, something they do, or something they know. And if you can do that to one or two levels, then you're actually linking in with the whole PCI compliance as well. Health and safety was another sort of issue that some companies are concerned about. There is a necessity for the employer to make sure that the environment that an employee is working in is correct. But if you actually ensure that you're doing checklists and making sure that you're ensuring they have a good working environment throughout the recruitment process, then you're really sort of helping that issue as well. And the other question is asked a lot is on the equipment side of things. And if you ensure, because people are really wanting to become home workers, so a lot of it you can actually ask in the home workers to provide a lot of the equipment themselves and a lot of the best practices, and most of the companies that I've dealt with, that is what they're doing. Could we just move on to the next slide, please? Just the last couple of slides here, just on the managing of the people. Team leaders, huge part of making sure that home working is a success, and it's overlooked in a lot of times. Because I think, as Jonty mentioned earlier, the team leaders are the sort of first port of call if there's a technical issue, or if there's some sort of maybe a product issue, or just anything. So it's really making sure the team leaders have the skills, so they've got the technical skills and that they are available. So it's really making sure that the team leader is also able to deal with this sort of different demographic. So it's a very different type of, I suppose, managing experience that they're going to have. So as I said there, it's less formal, less coaching, it's more sharing of experience and sharing of the business experience. I think there's some people may have come up with some other ideas to this, but it is recreating that informal socialisation, and chat and instant messenger is a fantastic way to do that. Facebook and online clubs, but ensuring that these online clubs are coming from the employees themselves, so it's not something that is being forced upon everyone, and just including them in as many things as possible. If there's a dance going on within the company, they're invited to it, or if there's a fun day or whatever. That digital photographs and just any sort of involvement, just anything is great. So for the next slide, please. And just to leave you all with a few critical success factors. As I mentioned, the team leader is fantastic for this sort of remote support. But another way to do this is to create a help desk so that there's always somebody there that can support the home workers. Loads and loads of ways to do this. The other thing is really to limit the visits to the office. We were talking earlier about building it into the culture and enabling people to come in, and if that's what the culture of your organisation is, that's great. But a lot of home workers, they really don't want to be having to make that trip, so it's keeping it to a minimum. So it's maybe not cutting it out altogether, but it's keeping it to a minimum. And as a segue, bar one slide into Mike's session later, it's really using that technology that you have to the best. So there's the webcams, there's managing everything remotely with everything that you've got, looking at your knowledge management system, seeing what you have, seeing what you can create in the home environment. So there'll be a lot of technology out there that you can harness and can use at home. And just on to the last slide, because I have gone through a real whistle-stop tour there on home working, and we actually had a workshop back in September of this year, and we're actually going to be doing another workshop in June where we're going to ask companies to share some of their case studies, best practices and benchmarking. We're just in the process of getting the exact date, but it will be the beginning of June 2012, and it will be at the Paddington Hilton. So if I'll keep in touch with anyone that's on this call, and if anyone wants to register and is interested in learning more, then you can go to the website. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that.
Whistle-stop tour, Jonty.
Yeah, for that whistle-stop tour, which is wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. We've had some very interesting comments in from the audience, looking at some of the barriers. Luke has said an additional problem not listing on the barriers is internet connectivity. Most home network connections, ADSL, are not capable of supporting a full quality setup. Mike, if I'm not mistaken, you've got a slide on that in a couple of minutes' time.
I do touch on that, Jonty. Yes, I've got some personal experience which I do want to share. So
we'll be dealing with that. Martin has said for us we deal with customer payment details, so secure and easy to use systems is quite important. And I guess Gillian touched on PCI compliance, and there's certainly some quite good systems such as off-board IVRs that can do payment processing, which could help with that, I guess. Simon's got an interesting point here about one of the barriers is the flexible working hours of supervisors, coaches, and call center managers. Gillian, I don't know if you've had much experience in that area, flexible working hours.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good way around that. And a lot of what a lot of companies do is actually that the team leaders will be home working as well, so that they can do a lot of the split shifts, and actually their days can follow the bulk of their teams, and that really gets over that very well. And the team leaders really enjoy that and get a lot out of it, because they really feel that they are really there for their staff, so to speak. So I've spoken to a lot of home working team leaders.
Yeah, and certainly if anyone in the audience has got any experience of flexible working in the contact center home environment, if they could leave that in the comments box below. Shabnam says that one of the barriers for them is that in an organization we need to really clarify the funding situation to see what money for this is available in terms of software and so on. So I guess that ties in a little bit with around the other priorities, but just actually proving the return on investment for that. And Simon's made an interesting comment that the main reason for deploying home working for us is increased flexibility around demand, and I think Gillian, you touched very much on that, and I think that it's that short addition. I won't attempt to pronounce the way you did. It's the ability to bring people on board at very short notice, and certainly it's one of those things where if you've got a sudden peak and you want to bring some people in the office, it takes an hour to get there. For only an hour or 2 hours doesn't become very possible, but in a home environment it certainly could do. So before we move on, I'm just going to bring up another poll, and this is the last of our polls, which is, what are your plans for home working in the contact center? So the options there are: it's already implemented, it's in the strategic plan, we're planning to deploy in the next 12 months, or we don't have any current plans for home working. So be interested to see what the reactions are there. If you could just click on the most appropriate box for you there. Again, if it doesn't fit into a box, if you want to put your comments into the comments box below. So just going to share the details now, and so what we're seeing is 25% is already implemented, 23% of you have it in the strategic plan, and I certainly think that's very encouraging, and 33% are intending to deploy in the next 12 months. I think from what I've been picking up, and Gillian, you must be feeling this, home working has gone from something that's being talked about to something that is really becoming a very critical part of a contact center setup.
Absolutely, Jonty, and I think for a lot of the reasons we talked about earlier, it's and this is actually from June, because I did a similar survey in June time, and it's moved even from then towards people taking a lot more action on it. So very encouraging to see that.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we're now into the part of the presentation where we're going to look at some of the technology. We can have a look at some of that ADSL, for instance. So I'm going to hand across to Mike Murphy. Mike is the Regional Practice Manager for Interactive Intelligence. Mike, if you'd like to pull up the slides on your screen, and we'll be looking at what a typical setup would look like.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Jonty, and thank you, Gillian. So really what I'm looking to cover in the next few slides is some examples or scenarios where, if you will, good technology can actually help enable the home working strategy. And certainly several of the questions that Gillian raised and several of the questions that yourselves have raised on the webinar so far, you may find that some potential answers to those questions here. But kind of jumping into what I would say here is like the current demand from businesses. The majority of my work today is helping customers figure out how to deploy their operations in a more virtual way than we've been doing to date. And really this is all about getting, if you will, disparate pieces of technology out of, if you like, remote centers, and actually bringing it all together in a proper, safe, secure environment, i.e. a data center. And if that happens to be the customer's data center or my data center, that really doesn't matter. But the point is, from the data center then, to be able to deploy my functionality, whether it's to a main office, to a remote office, or to the home office, which is the topic of today, there really shouldn't be a difference. There doesn't need to be a difference. It should be the same functionality for the same user, because effectively they are. If they're an agent, they just happen to be physically sited in a different location. So from that perspective, really for me, the demand for driving for virtual operations is what's pulling through a lot of utilization around home office. And I can certainly say that around the current business climate, I think companies are really looking to exercise this possibility and get some returns on the back of being able to deploy resources at home. A little point to mention as well is, don't forget the mobile workers. So the guys who are out on the road all the time. So whether it's engineers or whether it's salespeople, they are part of the operation. So to that end, they could be part of the picture to helping solve a customer issue. And then finally, the guy in the green suit on my slide here really is the customer, and he's the guy who's really putting in his requests from this kind of supplier here, this example. And those requests really could be calls, chats, emails, etc. If you like, the channel no longer matters really. We should be able to route and queue that work to the resource wherever they are, whether it's home, whether it's in an office. It should really be irrelevant. So as we kind of move into one of the challenges that we've already spoken about on this session, and that is the connectivity. So how do I safely and, if you like, elegantly sort of connect my users so that I'm delivering a great, consistent customer experience every time? And really it comes down to the key, which is broadband. So for your actual individual employee, the question's got to be asked, what is basically your broadband provider? Because based on that, you'll be able to deploy in a variety of different ways. So I've shown some examples here. For example, in a more urban environment where perhaps cable is actually available to the employee, then running on things like a Virgin Media broadband connection, you'll find a great, terrific speed. And over that connection, your voice and data can be safely run, and there'll be no impact to the experience for your customers. From that perspective, the choices then are, you may not even need to put an actual telephone for the agent actually in their home, because that functionality can be fully taken care of through a USB headset into their laptop or PC, as the case may be. If it's a case where there's a preference to maybe have a phone of some description in the event of something going wrong with the actual machine itself, then an IP phone, like you can see there, is an example of an IP phone with a headset. That's again a practical and a safe, good quality solution for that kind of scenario. So from that perspective, for the guys who live close to high-speed broadband, remember that BT's Infinity product is now being sort of launched, so it's kind of starting to be introduced, and that's looking to give these kind of very high-speed broadband connections. Now, once we get all that through the country, everybody will be comfortable. But for now, it's very much around the cities. So more relevant to me really is the fact that I'm a low-speed broadband dweller, if you will. So where I live, I just can't get any decent speeds at all. So from my perspective, I actually utilize this method for my own home working myself. What I do use the broadband for is to actually connect and provide my data connectivity. And the same would apply for an agent, very, very capable. But for me, in my own experience, when I tried to run my audio over the broadband, the quality was just not good enough. And I would get clipping, I would get sort of fuzzy noises, and certainly from a working perspective, it just wasn't practical. So for me, to actually then provide a second telephone line, that allowed me then to make sure that my audio quality every time was going to be good. So kind of running both in parallel, broadband for my data, the second telephone line for my audio, that's a very practical, cost-effective, and also a solid solution to that particular problem. As you can see in that scenario, and the old telephone that will plug into the telephone line will do nicely. In this kind of fashion as well, I've often seen other customers deploy maybe a DR scenario where they have to temporarily put people in a kind of a temporary location. They've got some network access, so being able to sort of enter a mobile phone as a destination is quite practical too, to kind of work in this sort of temporary environment. So for me, in my experience, there are two solid connection solutions that will be safe and maintain good quality for your customer. So then that really brings us back to the question of, so where am I actually working today? And if you think about the initial slide that we talked about, where we're looking at a virtual scenario, Here we're sort of seeing an example of an agent log-on screen for some interactive intelligence software. And in this case, you can see these are my credentials that are on there. But just draw your eyes to the station type with a symbol for the phone. And you can see there's a drop-down menu, and in there you've got a variety of connection options for the user. And for me, really, this is a good example where, software today must be able to allow employees work wherever they need to work. So if it's the main office, I would log on as a workstation user. If I was in my remote office from where I normally work, I would log on as a remote workstation user. So hopefully you're seeing how this tool allows me to be really flexible in how I deploy. In my home office, I could connect as a remote number, which is how I do it myself when I work at home. If it's a case where I have the privilege of being close to fast broadband, then I could actually log on as a SIP soft phone. And when I log on that way, then I don't actually need a phone in my house. I just plug in a headset and off I go. So that kind of shows you how the power of this software can allow you to be complementary to your home agent strategy. It's just another deployment option. And then touching on some of the points that were raised around, okay, so how do I feel engaged as part of the organization? So what I'm showing you here really is the sort of, when the agent fulfills the logon process, this is an example, okay, just an example of what information we can actually show to an agent. And it's quite busy, and I suppose from a promotional perspective, that's why it's quite busy really. It's just showing what's capable of the software. But again, I would draw your attention to the top two boxes really, the one on the left and the one in the middle. So if you can imagine, this is me, I'm an agent, I'm in my home office, I'm doing my work. If you can see the client group, you will see there that I can see my colleague Flavio, Scott, Greg, Arna. These are my colleagues, I can see what they're doing, they can see what I'm doing. At the moment, I'm on a call, I'm dealing with a customer who is the weather phone, it's an interesting example. But I can also see that my colleagues are also on the phone as well, and vice versa, they can see me too. So from that perspective, these are my team members, these are my colleagues, these are the guys who I would interact with most, if you will. If it's a case where the status is showing that they're available, but actually not on a call, it's quite easy for me to sort of set up a text conversation with these guys just to sort of keep in touch and that kind of thing as a sort of a text messaging capability between myself and my peers. What's also very useful, though, is getting more back to the business side of things, is if I feel that I need some assistance, then with this kind of technology, I can just press assistance, at which point then the system actually looks for who is my supervisor and connects me to that supervisor. What's really cool now is that the supervisor then can be brought into the conversation very, very quickly and can actually be, if you will, like a silent listener to the conversation. So perhaps I've got I'm an agent, I've got a stressful customer on the call, I'm starting to lose a bit control of the actual customer. I press assistance, and now I've got a supervisor also listening to the customer and starting to coach me in my ear about how I should handle this call. So again, regardless of geography, regardless of where I'm sitting, I've just said, look, I need assistance. The functionality will go and find me my supervisor. And if my regular guy is busy, it'll find the next available supervisor to help me. So from that perspective, there's absolutely no reason why a supervisor function could not also be a home working user. Absolutely no reason at all. And from that perspective, that should absolutely be considered. And the reason is because the information now is readily available about what my people are up to. So these like real-time charts that I'm showing here, these are showing me the status of the actual team members. So are they talking? Are they waiting? Are they talking internally? From that perspective, I can actually see and understand what my resources are doing wherever they're actually physically located. In the same way, I can see what the traffic is looking like. So calls waiting, emails waiting, chats waiting. That information from my perspective as a supervisor is readily and prevalently available. But we mustn't forget the idea of quality. So how can I make sure that the work that we're doing as a remote team is actually up to scratch? So from that perspective, and Gillian mentioned this on her slides, as well as having the sort of traditional audio call recording tools that we all have to help us record the calls and then do some quality scoring afterwards, we have to extend that to be able to include the screen recording as well. So being able to understand what the agent is doing and how they physically responded to an email, how they handled or responded to a chat. This will allow us to sort of capture examples of those and actually use those to then be quality assessed afterwards. And in a way, help the agent understand how we can become more adept, more fast, if you will, at responding to these kind of questions in the future. So you can see this idea then of multimedia recording and scoring becomes very important. So even though I am physically sort of separate from the organization, with software of this nature, really I actually do feel quite included. I can see what my colleagues are up to. I know that my supervisor is within reach in a very smart way, not a kind of disjointed way. It's in a way that's actually going to help me solve the customer problem. And I also know then from a supervisor perspective, I've got the tools and information on hand to be able to deliver a good job. So what I want to do then really is kind of stop talking about the software and just sort of move on to a real working example, which is a company called VIP Desk. And what's really cool about VIP Desk is, they're an outsourcer, but they actually created their business model on the back of having all of their agents from the get-go as home agents. So from that perspective, this is quite a unique organization, but really they've been fantastically successful, and they've been able to win some fantastic awards over their tenure. But the absolute key basis of their business model is they don't have a big building with lots of agents in the building. All of their agents are actually home-based employees. So it's a really good working example of this strategy, in absolute full-on use. And from that perspective, I'll encourage you to go and do some digging and investigation there, and I can share with you some good ways to do that. I think the best endorsement really that VIP Desk could get as an outsourcer is one of their clients was successful in winning an International Service Excellence Award. I mean, from an outsourcing perspective, how fantastic is that really? One of my clients has won an international award. So these are sort of great endorsements to the strategy, and it kind of proves really that with the right software, the right technology, and the right approach that sort of Gillian outlined, we should be able to achieve these kind of results absolutely with a home working strategy. So I'm not going to dwell really on the content of this slide. You can sort of see some of the key metrics there already, but it's, really as a sort of as a model, I think it's now proven. I think some of the things that we're kind of concerned about, absolutely things to be concerned about, but actually there's no reason why we just can't crack on and start delivering the results that the business needs. So I mentioned the idea of somewhere to go, and this is actually a snapshot of our community site at Interactive Intelligence, and it's called theintelligent.com, so www.theintelligent.com, and I'd encourage you to pop along there. What's on there really is a collection of Interactive Intelligence customers, and they're giving you their feedback from using our software, case studies, reference testimonials. So from that perspective, that's a really good resource pool to have a look at. Now, the lady who's the president of VIP Desk, Sally Hurley, is the lady who's actually in the graphic on the slide. And Sally has a case study there that you can go through, but also just summarizing some of the benefits from that case study that she saw was, for her, her agents are all home workers. One program for the agents to learn was very important for Sally. It helped the agents get up to speed faster and reduce her training costs. The idea of having calls, chats, emails, any channel, if you like, being handled by the same program, from her perspective, she felt that was a great win because she can really utilize her skills across all the distribution of the work across her skills, all coming from one program, made it very effective. So when the chat queue went down, the emails were sent to the guys who could carry that. When the call queues went up, the sort of multimedia was taken away and everybody was put onto the call queues. So that kind of dynamic changing of work distribution was very important for Sally. Obviously, we mentioned the remote supervisor tools, which I think are a pivotal element from our perspective, and then the ability to sort of respond quickly and scale. From Sally's perspective, she's an outsourcer, so she wins deals, she loses deals. From that perspective, she has to be a bit more dynamic than perhaps everybody. But for her, that sort of dexterity was very important and one which she was very pleased to be able to utilize. So just coming into the last corner for me really is, there is a white paper that we're promoting on the back of this webinar, and it's called Success with Remote Agents is Not So Remote. So from that perspective, feel free to download that, and that will give you a bit more insight into Sally's case study and also some other elements of the functionality that may be of benefit. So with that, I'm going to hand back to you, Jonty, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mike, and we will certainly have that white paper will be on the Call Center Helper website on the webinar page, and we will also have a link to that website, which was www.theintelligent.com, but we'll have that link there. So it's time now for questions and answers. We've had quite a number come in so far. And the first question I'm going to pose to Gillian, but it would also be interesting if anyone in the audience has got any feedback on this, and that is, are people really more flexible working from home than working from an office. So I guess that's really, I guess, the acid test. So Gillian, is it really the case that people are more flexible?
Well, I would definitely say yes. Depends your definition of flexible, but if we keep it within a working definition, and just, I suppose, to the point I made earlier about we are getting into the halcyon days, and I remember it well as an ops director of when it would have been fantastic to cover peaks and troughs with even in split shifts. And this is happening with home working, that people are much more flexible because they are happier to take on overtime, they're happier to take on, or not even overtime, just happier to have a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the afternoon, or a few hours in the evening, whatever it is, to reflect the business. And I have had experience of this with a lot of clients that I've dealt with, and it's much more flexible, and for a lot of the reasons that you outlined, Jonty. People aren't having to get into an office and get themselves sorted out for that. They can just walk into a room and be there. So
yeah,
much more flexible.
We had some comment on this from the audience. Keir has said that I guess that's his company, Arise, are able to operate a no-shift policy, leaving agents to literally work when they want in response to flex working. And certainly, Keir, if you're there, I'd love to find out some more information on how you do that, and also how you, I guess, it's the flex system. How do you cover the gaps? But I guess that all points there's more flexibility. Have you come across that no-shift policy before, Mike? Have you come across one?
I've not come across the no-shift policy. But what I can certainly observe is that I think agents actually would value the opportunity to be a home worker and actually respect the employer for the, if you will, the inverted commas gift of being able to have that sort of flexibility in their work pattern. So in that context, I think absolutely the idea then of being more flexible, more cooperative, is kind of like a natural desire to sort of return the sort of the opportunity to be a home worker.
Oh, interesting. So another question's come in from Luke. Luke says, does the HS, I guess that's the Health and Safety Officer, have to visit the home worker to complete the assessment, or can the employer be trusted to fill in the checklist for themselves? So quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Jonty, and I think it's a great question, and the answer is really yes. If you're recruiting the right type of person within that recruitment process, then I would say yes, they can be trusted to complete that themselves. However, companies have different ways of getting around this, and some companies feel that they do want to have visits to the house. They just want to feel that sort of belt and brace, to use the old phrase. But certainly one of the clients I've dealt with, the way that they've actually got around it is by asking their employees to take sort of digital pictures of their environment.
I was just going to suggest that as an option.
Yeah, and that's really worked for them. So a lot of it is the company culture, but definitely I think you should be able to trust the employee to do that. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I certainly think the digital cameras are making life a lot easier for that type of situation. We've got a couple of questions in about PCI compliance, about things like screen recording, or about how do you record for compliance and performance. Mike, what's the best way to do PCI compliance?
Yeah, so PCI is very much an important element to make sure that we can provide an auditable, secure trail to the fact that information can't be revealed. So from that perspective, deployments of this nature must be PCI compliant. In order to accommodate that with recording tools, there are several ways to approach it. So a simple pause and restart is kind of like the most prevalent way of deploying PCI compliance. the pausing and restart applies as well to screen recording as much as it does to call recording. So in that perspective, the same technique would be used to make sure that that information is protected. But also, if you will, the sort of the next generation of these tools really is where the actual, if you will, the interaction around the actual payment is actually taken away from the agent screen completely. So although the agent may be in a full conversation with the customer, of which 15, 20 seconds may be around payment, for those 15 to 20 seconds, the sort of customer is brought to an automation tool as part of the platform, allowed to actually make their payment, receive confirmation that the payment was successful, at which point then the sort of customer is brought back to the agent to sort of carry on and fulfill the conversation. So from that perspective, there's absolutely no danger of information getting exposed in a home, if you will, that may not necessarily be within control reach of the firm. And as you can see, if you will, as time is going by, the ability to bring new tools around these sort of challenges is happy to make it easier and more streamlined. So from that perspective, more and more these issues are kind of being overcome and sort of going away safely.
Yeah, wonderful. We've got another question from Arnold who asks, I guess it's for Gillian, have you had an employee who you've put into a home-based office and it turned out to be a mistake? And why? This sounds like a more
well, actually,
like
yes.
an O-level HCC question.
Yeah, I would say yes, and I would say this is way back, many centuries ago, as the song goes, but it was in the Hilton days, and it was when or I suppose we as a company didn't have as much experience, which is I suppose why we do webcasts and consultancy now to help other companies not make these errors, and actually it was because we did not, I suppose, support the employee enough to, and they just were not the right type of person, and that's why I'm so passionate about this, getting the right demographic. They just couldn't cope with, or they just did not like to be in the home environment, and that was actually more the sort of company, I suppose, error more than anything else, and that's one of the things. It's I suppose you can recruit to that model, but another very important thing is to definitely ensure that you take, if you have employees that you're wanting to move to the home environment, that you actually, I suppose, put them through very similar tests to that you would put the sort of new recruited people to home working through, and that's something that right at the very beginning, and I'm talking about at the very beginning of the pilot, that we didn't do it with Hilton, and learned very quickly that it was something that we should do. So,
and I think that's a very valuable learning experience there. Thank you very much for that, Ginny. Well, that's all we've got time for now. Just